All right, good morning. I hope you guys are ready. I hope you got your cup of coffee. Let's see, who's got first blood this morning? I don't see anybody just yet. Fish and golf, good morning with first blood. Let's do this. All right, good morning. I see Fish and Golf and Pit Danny over there on YouTube. Sergeant Major watching on Rumble says the coffee is ready. And we're going to talk about censorship this morning. We're going to talk about riots and censorship and immigration problems. And, we've talked about the censorship situation a few times before. And consider this a global First Amendment audit. I've often said on the show that the United States of America is not the last bastion of freedom, not the last bastion of liberty, right? Many people think of it that way, and that is incorrect. You're historically incorrect in that. The fact is that the history of the world is an immense struggle against the oppressive, destructive tyranny of mere nature, and men and women collaborating and cooperating together to fend off the ravages of a world that essentially seeks to consume you. As we developed culturally, socially, politically, we created cooperative systems that were themselves inherently tyrannical. And then eventually, there was the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. At that point, when that happened, the nature of the world was tyrannical. The world over, governments were a centralized authority ruling over people who had essentially no freedom to act, right? The extent of your freedom to act was spelled out for you. The law prior to the establishment of the United States and the Constitution was proscriptive. You may, you will, you can, right? And then we get the U.S. Now, even when you go back to the handful of historical democracies, like the Greeks, right? The tyrannical government preceded the establishment of the voting Senate, of the conceptual representational democracy. And so the tyrannical problem was already entrenched in the system. Not so in the United States. We have the Constitution. So baked in before the government is constituted are those presuppositions that the individual has rights. Those rights are God-given and constituted to the individual as they are created. So you are born free. Only in America. Today, that remains true. Only in America. It becomes less true every time a Democrat is elected, every time a weak Republican is elected, right? Every time the people choose an inadequate representative, which, let's be fair, has been their habit for some time. People beg for the tyranny. But we have a constitution that protects us even against our own deep depravities. This is not true across the world. So the United States is not the last bastion of freedom. It's not as if we live in a world which was free and then tyranny has overtaken the world and this is the last place that tyranny is beginning to touch. No, it is that we live in a world which was tyrannical and liberty made its first footfall, its first beachhead, its first initial incursion in the war against tyranny on the shores of the United States of America. We enjoy the First Amendment here. Largely and in theory at this point, but we do have the First Amendment, and it does still retain some power. That power has been perverted and corrupted and curtailed by what we now know to be proved coercive collusion between the federal government and some particular and specific private entities, those including most social media platforms and excuse me, news outlets. You know, forgive me, I'm still getting over this cough. And we've talked about the difference between the way it works in the United States and the way it works abroad. Great examples are in Canada. Not only is it the case that when the party in power changes, sorry guys, not only is it the case that when the party in power changes, what constitutes hate speech changes. Okay, sorry about that. Just a little cough that I'm still trying to get over. T-Rex sore ass. That's funny. Anyway, in Canada, the Constitution, the way that the hate speech laws are constituted, not only is it the case that what is defined as hate speech is so vaguely defined that it changes depending on which party is in power. But we saw in the last few years with the trucker convoy that the government had the audacity to go so far as to freeze the bank accounts of people who dissented against the common narrative. Tim, that's funny. And then, of course, we can look over, across the pond to Great Britain and recall the story of Count Dankula, who trained his cute little pug, his girlfriend's pug, to do the German salute as a joke. And I mean, not even all that funny a joke, and not even all that compellingly interesting a joke, just a silly joke. And he spent time in jail and was fined thousands and thousands of dollars over that joke. So, obviously, the First Amendment is not a thing for those people. Of late, the conversation about illegal immigration and the dangers of unchecked immigration has been an important part of the political conversation here in America and abroad. Most especially across Europe, where they have huge problems with Middle Eastern immigrants, not only flooding the nation, but setting up enclaves, cultural enclaves, where it's not just the locals being pushed out, but you've got these Sharia law districts where the local police are actually physically forbidden from the space, and they enforce their own laws. They're essentially setting up an autonomous zone. I mean, that should be treated like an act of war, an act of occupation, an act of invasion, because it is. So, last week, there was an incident where, as a result of this incredibly open border policy and people just coming in, the headline reads, "Violent clashes erupt in Dublin after stabbing of 5 people as police blame far-right ideology." Police blame far-right ideology. It is far-right to believe that one must secure the borders of a country against hostile invaders. Right? Violent clashes broke out between police and far-right protesters in the central part of Dublin, Ireland, on Thursday after a knife attack in the capital city earlier in the day left 3 children and 2 adults injured. Irish police said they arrested 34 people after the riots. Speaking during a press conference Friday, Garda Police Commissioner Drew Harris said police could not have anticipated that the stabbings would have triggered such disorder. That's another thing that we talk about often on this show. I don't know what the courts have had to say on the subject in Europe, to be fair. But in the United States, the courts have been very clear. The police have no duty to defend you. If you're being stabbed to death by an MS-13 gang member while he is loudly declaring that he is an illegal immigrant, and the entire local police department stands and watches it happen, that according to the Supreme Court, they have done nothing wrong. They bear no liability. They are not required to intervene. And if you happen to survive the predations of these criminal aliens, these hostile foreign invaders, you will not have a cause of action to sue the police department for refusing to defend you. Now keep in mind, I'm not talking about a crime happens to you and there's no cops around. This is an important distinction. If they stand there and watch it happen, they have no legal duty to interfere. The only thing that they can possibly be required to do is to arrest the criminal after the fact. So they got to wait for him to run out of steam. They got to wait for him to get tired of stabbing you. And then they have to come over and arrest him. Roger? So understand that. Now, so all that happened. There were riots in Dublin because people are pissed off. Hey, close the borders. We've got enough of these criminals here. right? The number one new baby name for little boys in Ireland right now, I shit you not, is Mohammed. Now, Conor McGregor is a famous MMA fighter. Conor McGregor under investigation for hate speech for criticizing Irish authorities on immigration. Remember what I was saying, right? Back during the trucker strike, the Canadian government seized the bank accounts of people who not even people who spoke out, people who made contributions, right? There were GoFundMe and Indiegogo campaigns to raise money to help the truckers pay for fuel and food so that they could continue the strike, so they could continue their protest movement. And those people were, the contributors had their bank accounts frozen and seized. Last Thursday, Dublin was rocked by riots after a man rumored to be an Algerian immigrant stabbed several people, including 3 little children. Okay, right here, this bit, rumored to be an Algerian immigrant, there has been a fact check on that. He is an Algerian immigrant. One of the papers, I'm not going to say which one because I forget which one it was exactly, but one of them ran with it, and a few others quoted it. Ran a fact check on the idea that the Algerian stabber was an immigrant, and they said, no, he's actually an Irish citizen. Yeah, he's an Irish citizen. He immigrated 20 years ago and gained citizenship. Believe it or not, being a citizen does not mean that you're not an immigrant. Right? The claim is not that recent Algerian immigrant or illegal Algerian immigrant. The claim goes to immigration without assimilation. You've come here, you've fled the country that you didn't like, come to the country that you thought would be better, and instead of being better in the country you fled to, you've come here with your California fucking politics and voted for more baby murder. You child-stabbing son of a whore. In the wake of the riots, the police commissioner tried to blame the far right. That's hilarious. And former UFC champion Conor McGregor then spoke out against how the authorities dealt with the situation and had been dealing with immigration. Innocent children ruthlessly stabbed by a mentally deranged non-national in Dublin, Ireland today. That's another great piece of language right there. Non-national. That's correct. He may be a citizen now, but he is not a natural born citizen. He is not a national, right? Our chief of police had this to say on the riots in the aftermath. Drew, not good enough. There is grave danger. Drew is the chief of police. There's grave danger among us in Ireland that should never be here in the first place. And there has been zero action done to support the public in any way, shape, or form with this frightening fact. Not good enough. Make change or make way. Ireland for the victory. God bless those attacked today, we pray. This right here, make change or make way, that's actually a great slogan. Make change or make way. Hey, elected officials, do your fucking job or step down so we can elect someone who will. Make change or make way. That's a great use of the language. Tim Lowry says, not sure I should be listening today. I have mandatory diversity training at 1. Oh, have fun with that, Tim. Oh, I just love diversity training. Diversity training can always be summed up in one word. White men are evil and they will rape you if you look away from them. That's all you need to remember to pass your diversity training. McGregor made clear that he did not condone the riots and said they do nothing toward fixing the issues we face, but that he did understand the frustration and that things need to change. I do not condone last night's riots. I do not condone any attacks on our first responders in their line of duty. I do not condone looting and the damaging of shops. Last night's scenes achieved nothing toward fixing the issue we face. I do understand frustrations, however. Right, and that actually sounds pretty fair. But what has been the response to that? What has been the response to that? The response to that has been this senator. Patrick says no audio. Well, that's a damn pity. What she says, if you think about it, all law is about restricting freedom. And so we are restricting freedom for the common good. This is the Irish Green Party Senator Pauline O'Reilly. She says that the government's hate speech bill is about restricting freedom, and that's a good thing because we're restricting freedom for the common good. I wonder if that sounds familiar to anyone at all. So we have this article about it from the Daily Wire. This is from Louder with Crowder. Now, this right here is the reason that the First Amendment is such a big deal. It's so important, right? What she's talking about doing, if it were being done by an American senator, would be laughed out immediately, or at least it should be. And if it weren't, right? Let's say you had some hotshot young congressperson or senator like AOC, for example, who comes in and, oh, hey, we need to restrict freedom for the common good, and oh yeah, and a lot of cheering and everything for it, and it goes through and it actually gets signed by a Joe Biden type character. Well, then we have the First Amendment and we have the Supreme Court to say, oh, fuck your couch. We don't play that game here. They don't have that. And when I say they, I mean literally everybody except for the United States. So, like, if you live outside of the United States, your number one priority for the good of your entire country, your number one priority should be to craft, adopt, and establish something as close to resembling the U.S. Constitution as is possible. Because, frankly, the alternative is what's happening in Ireland, what's happening in Canada. The alternative, like, there's a lot to criticize the U.S. for right now. There really is. But unlike Canada or Great Britain, when an MS-13 gangster comes to kick down my door, I have an answer for that. In fact, 9 times out of 10, I have 5 answers for that ready to hand. And that's my Second Amendment right, because the right belongs to the individual and not to the government, and the Constitution restricts the government from interfering with those rights. That is not something that exists for 90% of the world right now, or ever has. We're not the last bastion of liberty. We are the first beachhead. We've talked a lot, not on this, on the show too, but as Americans, and the American government has spent a lot of time talking about the idea of exporting American democracy to other countries. But look around at the countries where we've theoretically done that. South Korea, they're thriving, sure. They're making money. Are they armed? Can they say the words they want to say? Hell, look at the Ukraine. One of the very first things that they did, that they felt they had to do when Russia came across the fence, was to arm the citizens. Here's a revolutionary concept, motherfuckers. Why'd you disarm them to begin with? Because you did. You disarmed your people, and when shit got real, they were not prepared to deal with it. We don't deal with hostile foreign invaders in this country on a large scale normally, because individual governments will not send their military to do that. They won't send their military to do that because if you can get past the overwhelming power of the United States Army, then you're faced with a much more frightening proposition, and that is the United States citizenry. Now, this country is not as well armed as I would prefer it to be, but there are some creative and dangerous people in this country who are comfortably well armed and are very comfortable with fighting to retain the rights that they enjoy. Myself among them, obviously. Good God. Imagine hostile foreign invaders, armed, and willing to sling some lead, getting right nearby, and how that's going to work out for them. It's not going to be great. That's why we have the illegal immigration problem that we have today, is because it's that slow, insidious drip. And like frogs being slowly boiled, we find it difficult to acknowledge the threat sufficiently to take decisive corrective action against it. And that's going to cause us, well, it's already causing us a lot of problems. Now, censorship of that sort doesn't happen in the United States because of the First Amendment. Instead, excuse me, and I can't believe that I'm going to be forced to defend a Democrat, but only kind of, sort of. We talked about the immigration problem in New York City and how Mayor Eric Adams actually came out and said, hey, I don't see an end in sight. This problem is going to destroy New York City. Well, just a few days ago, last week I think it was, we had this story. New York City Mayor Eric Adams accused of 1993 sexual assault, court document says. I'm not going to go into the story so much. I'm not going to go into this story in particular. I just want you to kind of feel that, right? I don't think Herman Cain was the first time it happened. I think Herman Cain was the first time it was so visibly and unapologetically fabricated. Right? Herman Cain, black Republican running for president, and all of a sudden he raped a bunch of people so long ago that there's no possibility that there can be any evidence. And so all you've got is the word of these complainants that nobody's ever heard of. Turned out many of them had never even met the man. And as soon as he stepped down and withdrew his campaign, they all vanished. You never heard another word from them, right? The same thing happened with Judge Kavanaugh. And in that case, we even learned that the creepy porn lawyer, what was his name? Avenatti, was trolled by 4chan users who fabricated their claims and, trolled him into basically making false claims and got him in a lot of trouble, which opened the door to get him in a lot of other trouble. But, the Kavanaugh story, just painfully and obviously fabricated, conveniently fabricated. Same thing with Donald Trump, right? All of a sudden, there were all these women that said that they had been sexually mistreated by Donald Trump. And then we start hearing the stories. Like Stormy Daniels was a great example. She said that they had sex, that he cheated on his wife with her, all this stuff, and then he gets accused of gag order of having her pay for non-disclosure agreement, et cetera, and then little reported, it turns out that Stormy actually recanted. Stormy actually came out and said, it never happened, I lied to sell books. And that went drastically underreported, and he still ended up in court over those claims, which she herself said she lied about. And then you had a couple of porn stars that said, yeah, we had sex with Donald Trump a while ago, and then they start telling their story, and well, we didn't actually have sex with him. We met him at a party, and he invited us up to his penthouse, and we had a nice steak dinner. And then as we were leaving, he tried to kiss me. I'm like, honey, he tried to kiss you. Right? Okay. Little victim blaming here. The rich, pretty man invited you to a steak dinner in the penthouse. You're a porn star. You're famously a porn star. And the rich, pretty man is famously interested in women. And he invited you to his room for an expensive steak dinner. There has got to be a point at which the information available is sufficient for you to understand that essentially by logging into this website, you're agreeing to the terms and conditions of the services. Right? That doesn't mean you can't withdraw your consent later, which clearly you did. But right up until he tried to kiss you and you refused, you had intimated through your actions and agreements that you intended to comply with the terms and conditions of the arrangement. You went to the fucking hotel room with him, right? So now you got Mayor Eric Adams, and all of a sudden, Eric Adams says, Democrat who's already running New York into the ground, says, hey, I think this illegal immigration crisis is dangerous. And magically, he got in a time machine and went back to 1993 to rape somebody because it's politically convenient for him to get his dick wet to save face for a bunch of criminals. So, as much as the First Amendment protects us in this country from the overt activities of the government, individual government actors, and make no mistake, this article is from CNN, right? We know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that our government, most especially the FBI and the DNC, have been in active collusion in a conspiracy to defraud the American people through acts of censorship relative to things like the Hunter Biden laptop, right? The Russia hoax, right? The Chauvin case, the McMichaels case, through acts of censorship, disinformation, misinformation, and collusion with private entities. Our government has been engaged in the criminal activity of censoring the American people. If you expect for 1 second that this woman drummed up to accuse Eric Adams of sexual assault from literally 20 years ago. Is that only, no, shit, 30 years ago. Oh. 19. Sorry, guys. I know this one hurts a little bit, but 1993 was 30 years ago. Woo! Yep, this beard is this color. That is correct. Believe it or not, my mustache is also this color, but you know, it is what it is, right? But if you believe for one moment, let's assume for just a moment, for the sake of argument, that Eric Adams did indeed sexually assault a woman in 1993. Right, and Sergeant Major says Eric Adams was a little kid. Let's check that out real quick. I was just about to say that. Eric Adams' age. Let's see. He's 63 years old. So 30 years ago, he was 33. He was a spry young man living his life 30 years ago. Okay. He wasn't a child, right? But 30 fucking years ago, let's just say for the sake of argument that he actually did the thing he's being accused of. Couple things. maybe a man could change a lot in that time. Two, apparently it wasn't a problem before now. If 30 years later you haven't sought some sort of recrimination, some sort of justice, then it just wasn't important to you. You don't get to have it just be important to you now. But here's the real big one. It happened 30 years ago. And all of a sudden, when it's convenient, you're coming forward. Assuming that it happened, you're asking me to believe one of two things. That the claimant is not politically motivated, which in and of itself is an indictment of her motivations, right? If the claimant herself is politically motivated, then the veracity of her claim must be in question to begin with. Or two, right? And this is all assuming that he actually did the deed, which, frankly, given the record on these cases, I am inclined to disbelieve. But two, and this is the more likely case, assuming that it happened at all, a Democrat activist, a DNC agent, or, quite probably, an FBI agent sought this woman out precisely to engage in a character assassination maneuver against Eric Adams for the crime of having the wrong think. Now, unless they manage to make this stick and con a bunch of New Yorkers with this bullshit, frankly, if Eric Adams is talking about the illegal immigration situation in this way, continuing into the future, he will get reelected in New York. And even as a Democrat, if he's going to take a hardball stance on criminal aliens entering the city and destroying it, drinking up the welfare programs, stealing tax money by simply existing and having that money funneled to them by Democrats, then I say go for it. If that's the thing that keeps you guys ticking and get your shit back in order, enjoy your fucking Democrat. Good luck with him. So that's I hope I've laid that out for you sufficiently. Basically, across the pond, up there in America's hat in Canada, the First Amendment does not protect you. In America, where the First Amendment does protect you, the enemy has its ways, and they will seek to subvert and end run your rights and take them away from you anyway. And you have to pay attention to that and be careful of it. Censorship in America is illegal. Until Barack Obama was in office, using mainstream media to promote government propaganda was illegal. But that law changed back in 2013, I think it was, under Barack Obama, precisely so that this misinformation age could come about, because that was the objective all along. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the show this morning. I think that's all I've got to say about that today. Thanks for joining us. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.